and the front page she hid under my shirt. I run the night desk at a paper that pretends it still owns Dawn. If you've ever woken to a headline that made your coffee taste different, that was my hand on the last line break. Most nights are triage. We cauterize commas, sand legal to a tolerable dull, and talk reporters out of metaphors that will get us sued. Then there are nights like the one Lena walked in with a proof tucked at her hip and a look like she'd already apologized to herself for what she was about to do. She didn't belong to us, and she did. Her beat was power without portfolio, funders, foundations, friendships that pass for policy. She freelanced our way and slept, I imagined, in rooms where wallpaper cost more than my car. I knew her work because she wrote people into corners gently enough you couldn't hate her for it. I knew her husband because the city did. His name was on a stadium, then a hospital wing, then a pole. He was a man who wore ambition like a tailored mercy. I was marking up a page one heed that wouldn't stop lying about the passive voice when she appeared at the glass and tapped once like a polite thief. She wore a black coat the color of expensive disagreements and a dress that practiced making eye contact with light. I buzzed her through because my better judgment prefers to work overtime. "Ben," she said, pronouncing it like we'd been mid-sentence all week, "I need 2 minutes, a staple remover, and your patience." "I can give you 2 of those," I said. She slid a folded broadsheet from under her coat and laid it on my desk as if undressing a secret. It was our front page, but cleaner than anything we'd print. Digital proof on heavy paper, the kind the publisher likes to frame. The lead story was ours and not yet ours, an investigation into the Riverfront Consortium that had spent a year buying meetings and calling it philanthropy. We had the shell companies, the invoices, the emails where the mayor wrote sentences future historians would enjoy. We did not yet have the line that makes lawyers hate the morning. Lena tapped a paragraph 3 graphs down. "The phrase 'backed by' implies underwriting," she said. "The money was earmarked as a pledge. If you run it like this, you're calling it cash." "Because it behaves like cash," I said. "Legally it isn't," she said, voice soft for the way that is harder to argue with. "You'll get sued. You'll win. You'll bleed in court until the rest of the story is tired." "Why do you care how much we bleed?" I asked. "Because people like us believe we can still be picky about motive." She looked at the proof a beat too long. "I care about whether your story survives," she said, "and because he will use my name to love-bomb your board if you hand him a pretext." Ah, the pronoun arrived. Her husband could marshal the kind of polite terror you put in cufflinks. I laid a ruler along the paragraph she wanted. Behind her, the newsroom hummed its nocturne, photo desk arguing with whether over light, copy editors hemming paragraphs into sense, the hum of old printers we no longer used haunting the bones of the building. "You could have emailed," I said. "He reads my email," she said. "You could have talked to Standards," I said. "He golfs with Standards," she said, then smiled with the smallest violence. "You are as far from golf as this building allows." "You're asking me to soften a sentence that leads the reader to the truth," I said. "I'm asking you to reroute the river," she said. "Same arrival, less broken infrastructure on the way." I paperclipped the proof to a pile labeled "Go or Die" and pulled the staple remover from between 2 dead pens. "You have 30 seconds to make me believe this isn't just you doing spousal triage." She leaned in enough that the smell of her perfume, citrus spiced with a dare, hired my attention. "Because tomorrow morning I am leaving the house with my name on it," she said. "Not for you, for me, but I'd like your reporting to stand when I do." I cut the staple and gave up believing in clean motives. "What's your language?" I asked. She pointed, touted as pledged support instead of backed by, follow it with "not yet wired," then let the invoices sing. "You'll be quoted by noon," I said. "I won't be home to read it," she said. "Is this where I ask why?" I said. "This is where you help me steal a knife from a man who uses it to slice cake," she said. It is a professional failing that I love a sentence more when it carries a threat like manners. I made the change and sent it to legal with the annotation that this would save us 6 months of punishment for being correct too soon. I wrote a new line under the head that said "pledged not wired," and initialed it so standards would call me, and not my boss. Then I looked at Lena in the way I try to avoid looking at anyone in this room. "You're bleeding too," I said. She brushed a knuckle under her eye like she might catch light. "Not from this," she said. "From the part where I've been pretending I didn't see what I saw." "What did you see?" I asked, less as a journalist than as the animal inside a journalist. "A calendar I don't belong to," she said. "A phone in a pocket that doesn't want to be near me when it rings. A foundation with a board seat shaped like a leash. Choose any make of betrayal you like. My favorite is the kind that calls itself a partnership." "You're good at names," I said. "I had to be," she said, and then the breath that followed weakened me for reasons I pretend are ethical. I called Page One and bought us 12 minutes by promising them an adjective they'd been wanting since noon. I called legal and swapped "backed by" for "touted as pledged support," and sold it like a prophylactic with a view. Then I walked her to the glass wall that keeps the city out and our glare in. The street below blinked in the rain like an apology. Our building is so close to the river you can sometimes hear it try out different truths in its sleep. "What happens after you leave?" I asked. "I become smaller in the places I was too large," she said, "and larger in the corners I starved." "And him?" "He becomes a press release," she said. "We didn't kiss then. This is not that story. We touched the way people do when they're keeping a promise they haven't made yet, a palm over knuckles, the thumb mapping a vein. She took her hand away first, which is a kindness I will not forget. At 10:47, the publisher called and asked why the heat was ugly. I told him because accuracy always is at first. At 10:59, legal blessed the heat with the reluctance of men who fear both discovery and dullness. At 11:18, the editor of the investigation walked to my desk and sat down without asking. He looked like a person who had been staring at other people's sins until the light felt loud. "You're going to get me fired," he said. "I'll get fired first," I said. "Order of operations." "It reads clean," he said, tapping the paragraph. "Cleaner than truth usually does." "Lena brought it," I said, "because if I was going to share my guilt with history, I wasn't going to hoard the best character." He tilted his head in the direction of the lobby like maybe she'd still be there. "You believe her?" "I believe whoever is willing to set a thing on fire that warms everyone in the room," I said. "She's burning a house." At midnight the servers coughed, then purred, and the digital front made its first appearance like an understudy remembering their lines. I wrote the push alert and killed the adjective I wanted because restraint is the sexiest thing I get to practice at work. We printed fewer papers than our grandparents would have forgiven and more than our grandchildren will believe. Lena texted at 12:13. "He's giving a speech at Halcyon at 7. I'll be in the back by the candelabras. If I need a witness, can you be a door?" I should have said no and practiced it until it felt like virtue. I said, "I'm an unlocked hatch, not heroic, useful." I finished the night the way I always do, a quiet inventory of everything that could still hurt us in the morning. I left my badge on the desk because the security guard eats his breakfast on our time. Then I stepped into a city that doesn't sleep so much as change outfits. The Halcyon had learned to decorate sincerity. It is a room where rich men love the sound of linen. He was on a riser with 12 flags, an arrangement that always looks like forgiveness. He talked about the river like it was a pet he could train. He called his plan a public-private miracle. He thanked his wife, and the way he said, "my wife," felt like what you say when you claim a table at a cafe you know you're going to be late to. Lena stood where she said she would, between two tapers tall enough to qualify as architecture. She had changed the dress and kept the look. When she saw me, something eased in her jaw. She took my sleeve with the precision of people who possess their limbs and steered me into a service hallway that smelled like time and bad ideas. "In 4 minutes," she said, "he's going to announce the number you softened. He expects me to smile on the cutaway like the city finally read his favorite bedtime story back to him. I am going to leave while they are applauding that number. He thinks leaving is a camera move. I want it to be a decision." "Where do I come in?" I asked. She pressed a key card into my palm. "I need a room that catches my breath but not my story," she said. "18th floor, second door on the left. The view will remind me the river belongs to no one." "You sure?" I asked, not about the room. "Yes," she said, without the adverb most people staple to that word when they're lying. We waited the length of a promise and a donor video. When the applause came, the polite, ecstatic kind that belongs to numbers more than people, she took my hand through 2 doors and an elevator and a corridor with carpet that knew how to swallow gossip. The room did have the river. It was black and intentionless and sincere. She set her phone on the desk, face down, like a small animal deciding to rest. Then she unbuttoned the top of her dress in the way of a person removing armor. We did not undress. We did not need to. She stepped into me like relief. I put my mouth beside her ear and let it say yes in a language that respects consequences. We kissed. It wasn't frantic. It was precise. My hand found the small of her back and learned it by heart. Her palm pressed the front of my shirt just above my ribs, then slid under and lay flat. That was the front page she hid under my shirt. The sentence her skin wrote there that said, "Choose me or be honest about why you won't." We didn't take what we couldn't keep in daylight. We kept what wanted to live there. After, she stood with her back to the window and the river made our shadows look like reconciliation. "What do you need in the morning?" I asked. "Coffee and an apartment where I can learn to be quiet without being silent," she said, "and a headline that still exists." "You'll have at least one of those," I said. She laughed, the kind of small laugh people let themselves have when they've done the harder thing and the easy thing is finally allowed. Then she kissed me once, briefly enough to be a promise instead of a receipt. He called her while I was in the elevator down, then texted, then called again. He left a voicemail we both heard by accident later in which he called her name like it was a press release. She answered none of it. In the morning our story landed. The heat was uglier than truth and stronger than fashion. We got sued by a shell company with a PO box. The documents entered Discovery anyway, which is a country I enjoy visiting more than most. She moved out a week later. The keys she returned were heavy in a way I could feel in my wrist when she dropped them in a bowl. We did not become a victory lap. We became a repetition that required care, small dinners, a plant that refused to live and then did, kisses that knew exhaustion and still did their job. Sometimes she would press her palm flat against my chest, exactly where she'd placed the front page the first night, and make sure it still fit. Sometimes I would read aloud a sentence from a story that had not learned to be brave yet, and the room would award it courage. He kept his jaw and lost some nouns. He stepped back, a verb I hate for the way it hides where you're stepping to. He went on panels and performed regret. He launched an initiative with the word integrity in it. The river continued to refuse applause. The court kept agreeing to let us be accurate. At the desk, I still sand headlines and talk shy commas into the light. I still hate the passive voice except when the sentence deserves it. Some nights I walk to the glass and the city looks up and pretends it's happy we remembered to name it correctly. Then I go back to my desk and label something ugly with honor. On the last line break, I think about the proof Lena laid on my table and the way her hand shook once before she steadied it. If the world lets me keep one habit, it's this: making room for a story to survive the morning after the kiss.